Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the resurrection of Tex Messages. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. I'm glad to be here once again. It's been a few months now, and I had a couple meetings with the producers and the sponsors and some of the fans' input as well. And what we came to the conclusion of is that an hour-long show might be a bit overkill. So the producers came up with some type of ideas that I could maybe do a half-hour show, then a half-hour editing. But as far as editing videos and technical work and really just electronics in general, I don't know the first thing about. So we came to the mutual agreement that we'd have a show that's about 20 minutes long. They felt that 20 minutes, stick some little introduction in and maybe add some instructional videos here and there, and then just call it good. Now, yeah, the show could easily balloon out of control, 1, 2, 3, 4 hour show, daily shows, but the likelihood of that happening is pretty slim. I don't have all the time a lot of time, definitely more time than probably the average person. Now, yeah, at 24 hours in a day is valid for every single individual living entity, but some of us just manage to have more time. As far as how that works, not really sure, but reality is, we got plenty of it here at the resurrection of Tex Messages. And that's the other thing too. See, as far as the resurrection of Tex Messages, I wasn't sure if it should be part one, the first resurrection, the second resurrection, or just part one, or just name the first episode Upon Return, the resurrection, and then go trail off back into the normally slotted Tex Messages. But the reality is, the resurrection of Tex Messages, it's very apropos. It's a fair title and a moniker. And now we're not in any way making a comparative analysis of this show to any higher intellectual creature. If anything, maybe the reciprocal. If you were to take higher intelligence and you were to take the reciprocal of that, you pretty much get Tex Messages. So as far as that goes, that would be a pretty fair comparison, ladies and gentlemen. So we're just going to continue to focus on the topics we've discussed in the past, mostly health related. We might get into transracial airport bathrooms and things of that nature, but for the most part, we'll just try to stick with health. Now, one of the reasons, you might be thinking, just to squash all speculation as far as why Tex Messages was, why we had the rug pulled, whatever, 3, 4, 5 months ago or whatever. I can't even count. The time is just, the days just lumbered by. So ultimately, we had to resurrect Tex Messages. It's actually sort of last minute. The producers phoned me in, and we had a couple meetings, and boom, here we are. Friday night, Elk River, Minnesota. Let's see, it's pretty cold outside, fairly cold in here, but yeah, we're back on the air, ladies and gentlemen. So there wasn't any health related issues, but like anyone, people go through their ups and downs, and and making sure to have proper health is always extremely important, which is pretty much why I try to write down everything I consume and the after effects as well. So, being a healthy parasite, so you got to find a healthy host too. And for me, the host is the earth and its creatures. So you got hens, you got acorn squash, potatoes, broccolis, butternut squash, and of course cauliflower. You can even make cauliflower pizza or they have flour in the name. So you use the flour. You take the flour. You got to have the flour from cauliflower to make the pizza dough or whatever the case may be. Then tomatoes, cheese, and all that other good fun stuff. But if you are allergic to milk products or lactose, then probably a good idea just to avoid cheese altogether. I've been slowly learning that possibly all milk products aren't really the best for humans. Now that's not to undermine the efforts and the contributions that dairy farmers make, because in all honesty, dairy farming, probably one of the toughest jobs out there. Now, is it a thankless job? If I spent all day thanking each and every individual for the jobs they do, number one, I wouldn't have time for text messages. The producers would probably fire me and hire somebody else. Maybe they'd make a show called In Don We Trust, or possibly Good Times Balls Deep. That could be another aptly titled show. So ultimately, so it's important to prioritize. Now, are we thankful for nurses, healthcare professionals, road construction workers, dairy farmers, agricultural farmers, retail? Absolutely. They do certainly more than I do on any given day. So it's absolutely important to just be grateful. And the whole taking something for granted, that's one term that is very difficult to understand, because what's not taking? Nobody's ever really provided an example of not taking something for granted. Everyone's like, well, you take computers working for granted, or light, or the grid working for granted. But if the grid shut down and we lost all our power and heat, I'd be deathly afraid of that. Something I don't know if that's not taking it for granted. Is using it taking it for granted? So there's just some tricky dialogue and lingo to parade through and do the lasso or whatever, or do the tango through and figure out what the true meaning is behind certain phrases and quotes that are oftentimes brought up. Now, there are a lot of great quotes out there. For example, one quote that I could think of, somebody mentioned it the other day. Sometimes if you want to crap gold, you have to eat crap, basically. So I suppose that's one thing to keep in mind, but you don't always have to eat it, and it's probably not a very good phrase, actually. It just sounded funny. The delivery of it was funny. We don't do comedy on this show, ladies and gentlemen, so if you're watching this for comedy, it's probably you're not really going to find it. Maybe if you went to stand-up comedy, or Minneapolis's humorous miracles, or St. Paul's silly sectors of comedy. So, but in Elk River, there's nothing humorous about it. People are pretty serious. A lot of them probably have guns, maybe throwing stars, samurai swords. So it's not really a community you'd want to act like a buffoon in. But the police force and everything, they're not overly aggressive as some cities are. So that's also a nice thing, and they don't necessarily have to be. Maybe there's plenty of good guys with guns around here, so maybe there's not a lot of crime or something. But stuff can happen anywhere, especially when you consider all the psychotropic drugs that are prescribed to people, and the neuro uptake inhibitor drugs and all these things. So basically about 90% of mass shootings, the perpetrator was on some reuptake inhibitor drugs or something like that. So antidepressants is basically what they are. And hey, everyone gets angry, depressed I mean, hell, when Text Messages was canceled, you know, yeah, I could have easily been clinically depressed at every. I mean, who would be? You know, to be on the lowest rated show on YouTube for 3 to 4 months and then just to have it canceled for really no reason. I mean, yeah, it's the lowest rated show, but I mean, at least you have some claim to fame. I mean, if it was middle of the pack, you know, it's not a big deal. You know, you got to have some type of quality and characteristic that allows some distinctiveness. And of course, we hope to incorporate more esoterics on this show as well. See, we don't really believe in national or international entertainment, more so regional entertainment, because, you know, in every single neighborhood or every town, city, village, state, country, there's going to be extraordinary people. Now, you may have heard the quote that for every good person there's someone better. That's usually the case. But I mean, just for providing entertainment and goodwill and all that stuff, there's really no substitute for specific people that you resonate with. So the idea just behind online media and the whole idea of individuals putting their own videos on and showing it to their friends, family, neighborhoods, or whatever, that definitely picked up a lot of steam because you're not being force-fed. You pick and choose what you're watching. I mean, yeah, there are some great shows on Antenna TV. Walker, Texas Ranger, one show. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Every once in a while they'll play some movies on there, but on Charge TV or Comet, but not too often. As far as cable TV, I have no idea what's on there. Ring of Honor, NASCAR, other great shows as well. I mean, cable TV, if you want to spend $100 a month or whatever cable TV is nowadays, then hey, more power to you. But here, at Tex, you know, we're on a budget here. It's a pretty big budget, but it doesn't account for $100 a month cable TV. Now it will account for driving to other locations and filming instructional videos and, you know, borrowing the insanely expensive camera to other people to have instructional videos and stuff like that too. So yeah, you know, if the camera breaks or something like that, or a vehicle breaks down, then we have plenty of money to get back on the saddle again, or back on the saddle, excuse me. So for the most part, cable TV is out of the question. Satellite seems like it's out of, plus it's probably just running dangerous microwaves through your head and through your face and body and everything too. Would a tinfoil hat help? Probably not, really. I mean, if the tinfoil hat might even make it worse, because it's probably acting as a magnet towards a lot of electrical signals. So you're really better off just not wearing a tinfoil hat. But I mean, the placebo effect is very strong, so if you're getting the placebo effect out of wearing a tinfoil hat, then it's probably not such a bad idea to do so. But for the most part, as far as microwave radiation, see, one other thing that's a little ironic is in what's called a microwave. Now a micro, you got a millimeter, and then you got the micrometer, and then there's nanometer, picometers, femtometers, all that stuff. It just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So microwave is a unit of measurement. So the microwave oven is, you know, I got to make that careful distinction. And yeah, it does emit quote-unquote microwaves. They're at the 2.4 gigahertz, which is also the same as Bluetooth, Zigbee, wireless internet, you know, cell phones and all that goofy stuff. So it is a little odd that the same frequency that microwaves use to cook food are also used to transmit through the air. Obviously a lot less intensity. A microwave oven, probably at least a kilowatt, some bigger, some smaller. And of course a cell phone is probably just a few milliwatts, you know, sticking on the carrier frequency and sending out the voices or information and all that stuff too. Now, there's a lot of different, there's called an ISM band radio frequency, which is around the 900 megahertz. A little better for longer distances and going through buildings and everything like that too. So you could use that for certain types of of radios and whatnot, but for the most part, generally most signals nowadays that are available to commercial users and citizens are 2.4 gigahertz. Because when you factor in radio that's going to your car, TV signals, and whatever military wants to use, and anything beyond that, they all have their own frequency bands that they're allocated based on the Federal Communication Carrier Corporation, or whatever it's called. Well, I don't think it's corporation. Apparently it's a federal. It's not like the Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned. The FCC is run by some federal organization, but yeah, so they allocate frequency bands for certain users and whatnot. That's why when you buy an appliance, they'll say should not interfere with this, that, and the other thing, because if it emits those weird frequencies, then it's going to interfere with stuff, which is what it's not supposed to do. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's just, a lot of people are a little bit paranoid about cell phone radiation, especially 5G radiation, which is just magnitudes of orders. It's just an order of magnitude more intense than 4G or especially 3G. So the safety efficacies of it aren't really researched very thoroughly. So it is one thing to keep in mind. Just to, maybe you don't need to have your cell phone on you all the time, because it is difficult to detect. I mean, you can eat bad food and know right away it was bad food. But I mean, you could probably stick your head in a microwave oven, and if you were to somehow bypass the safety controls and turn it on while the door is open, then you could definitely detect that something ain't quite right. So, but I mean, with cell phones, low intensity, it's just a low exposure for over a long period of time. It's like training for something or reading books. You gradually attain the knowledge over time, and then 5 years later, you seem like you're a pretty smart individual. That's probably how radiation works. It just slowly accumulates over time, then you find out, hey, you got some weird sickness and everything. So it is one thing to try to minimize exposure to cell phones and everything too. Now, is it as bad as cigarette smoke or secondhand smoke? Maybe it's worse. It's hard to say with that type of thing. But the nice thing about cell phone radiation is it doesn't make your clothes smell. So there is also that to consider. Now, so 20-minute show, looks like we've already hit the end of the show. I mean, it's comes up fast, ladies and gentlemen, but hey, the producers insisted on 20 minutes, and the fan input was, well, most of the fan input was more on the order of 5 minutes, so we got to make compromise. I wanted our show, 4 days a week, seemed perfectly reasonable and logical to me, but producers insisted on something like, well, they insisted on, 20 half hour, then a half hour editing, and the fans insisted on 5 minutes, so basically going to be 20 minutes, and that's, once you factor in the introduction and whatever stuff we're talking about, 20 minutes goes by pretty fast. And it's, a lot of times that when I'm satisfying sponsors and we have meetings there and the meetings go over, it is kind of irritating. So it's probably a good idea to try to keep it at least a little bit under 20 minutes, just to respect you, the ladies and gentlemen at home. Now, I used to be of the ilk that, if it's an hour long, people, you can watch 5 minutes and call it good, but it seems to be an all or nothing type deal. And as just one last example here before I wrap up the program, one thing that you can think about, would you rather read a book that's 1,100 pages with 200 pages of useful information, or would you rather read a book 400 pages long with 150 pages of useful information? So that's just something to think about. And this is Tex Messages, The Resurrection, checking out part 1 of the resurrection. As you can see, we've fully made it to carnal form. And thank you for watching. Appreciate it.